People who had a guest ruined the wedding. What happened? Story 1. Not really ruining the wedding, but it certainly changed the vibe leading up to the wedding. I asked my brother to be my best man at my wedding. My brother and I are Catholic, while my girlfriend is Episcopal. He said yes. Months after saying yes, he comes to us and tells us that he can't be the best man or even be at the ceremony because his priest told him it would be a mortal sin for him to be a witness to the ceremony. Because I am not asking for dispensation and getting married in an Episcopal church. Okay, understood. It's sad, but if that's the way he sees it, we'll deal with it. At this point, I asked my best friend to be my best man, and all is well. Or so we thought. A couple of months before the wedding, my brother started a campaign calling my entire family and telling them they would be committing a mortal sin if they attended my wedding, explaining how my children would be in the eyes of God, and that anyone who even sleeps under the same roof as us would be committing sin. What the hell? I found all this out through cousins and friends, and I am in complete shock. Luckily, I have a few cool families, and they all showed up for the wedding. Everyone had a "what the hell is wrong with your brother" question on the wedding day, but it was a great time with an open bar and a live band. Here's the kicker of it all. My mom is Catholic, and my pop is Episcopal. No divorces or any unhappiness, just your normal suburban family. Eventually, my brother's priest passed away. I'm a strong believer in karma now, and he then met his wife, who really knocked some sense into his head. She actually knocked enough sense into his head that he asked me to be the best man at their wedding, which I did very willingly and without any fanfare. He's still a staunch Catholic who says the rosary every night with his wife and 2 handfuls of kids and only attends Latin Mass on Sundays, but we're on good terms. We'll never be brothers who call each other up to see how the other is doing at random, but we'll be there for each other when it's necessary. If this dude's mom is Catholic and his dad is Episcopal, did his brother just admit he was also a... Story 2. My father-in-law repeatedly used my husband's ex-girlfriend's name during his speeches and when talking to me. His toast at the wedding was full of slurred speech and a story about Mark and Alyssa and their budding romance and how adorable it was. I'm not Alyssa. Alyssa was his girlfriend in high school. I actually knew Alyssa. She was a good friend of mine in high school. She cheated on my husband, and I pounced like a majestic tiger as soon as he was single. So if anything, I'm annoyed that I was confused with a cheater. I'm dark-haired, green-eyed, and have tan skin on the short side. She's light blonde, pale skin, blue-eyed, tall, and willowy. I'm not even sure how he got confused. My dad was fuming. I watched him almost go purple during my father-in-law's speech. My husband's parents got divorced when he was young. He was a severely cruel alcohol dependent, and I met him twice outside of our wedding. I didn't see much of my husband after he was 12 years old. He was very out of touch. That said, we had been dating about 6 to 7 years before we got married. He should at least get my name right. I just had to laugh. We don't interact with him. I've only talked to him once since our wedding. Story 3. I recently had my wedding, and we woke up together happy to be getting married. Then my soon-to-be husband received a text from his mother. Disclaimer, his mother had waist-length black hair. She cut and colored her hair exactly like mine. Shoulder-length brown with blonde streaks. I was livid. Of all days to color your hair, and to do it on my wedding day. Fine, I let it go and decided to just forget about it. Finally, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. I'm walking down the aisle and I reach the front. The parents were called up so we could all recite a vow together. Our wedding was held in front of a riverbank, mind you. His mother then proceeded to walk around me near the pastor instead of being with the other parents near the groom. She proceeded to loudly scream and fall. As she fell, she grabbed my hair and I fell with her inches away from the riverbank. My moment ruined. She got up, laughed, and walked away while I was on the ground trying not to cry. To be honest, I don't remember anything else from the ceremony. I was seeing red. We no longer speak to one another. And I will forever refuse to speak to that woman. My husband stands by me on that decision. To this day, when I think about my wedding, I tear up. She ruined it, and she didn't even feel sorry for it. And for those of you who say she fell and couldn't help it after watching our wedding video, her husband and the pastor were holding her arms. She deliberately stepped back and fell. Before that, she had been rather okay, but she started acting up during the time leading up to the wedding. One instance I can remember was during my husband's birthday. and she proceeded to get up in front of everyone in the restaurant and argue with my husband about the guest list. We wanted an intimate wedding just for the family, and she wanted to invite 3 of her friends and their significant others and their kids, which ended up being 11 people. She cried and yelled until she got her way. She embarrassed both of us and made everyone at the party extremely uncomfortable. She is the youngest of 4, so she has always been that way. She always wants all the attention on her. I think maybe she was mad that I was taking her only son from her. Story 4. They didn't ruin the wedding, but they did ruin a couple of pictures. An aunt and her family are notorious for showing up, eating all the food, stealing some drinks, and leaving. Her one son, the nice guy that he is, has dependency problems and just can't keep it together. Her daughter is trashy and has a new boyfriend every week. She will show up to family events, make a gigantic plate of food, talk to no one, and leave. My family has a free vending machine in the man cave style basement, and she will nearly empty it before she leaves. So when my wife and I were planning the wedding, we didn't invite the one cousin with dependency problems, because at that point he was in rehab, and we didn't let the girl cousin have a +1 because we were making some guest list cuts and she has trashy boyfriends anyway. Well, you can guess who shows up and only the reception. Skip the wedding part. We had an open liquor and beer bar, so the rehab cousin got blitzed immediately. He was jumping into every picture he could and becoming a real nuisance. My dad, no relation to this cousin, almost had to kick him out before other family members took him away. The girl showed up to our semi-formal wedding wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt, and her boyfriend of the week, who had the worst tobacco smile and looked like your typical redneck, was wearing a camo shirt and ripped jeans. She was filling her plate multiple times. She's not fat, she just takes as much as she can and stores it for later, while her boyfriend got hammered. Then they had an awful makeout session in the middle of the dance floor while each other. I went to the bar to get a drink, and since I was the groom, people led me in front. Her boyfriend was there and was like, "What the hell?" Someone else said I was the groom, and he was like, "You're the groom? No way. Let's take shots." Everyone else that night was wonderful. It only takes a couple of trashy family members to bring the mood down. Man, I am not sure if I'd get irritated or laugh my head off with this gatecrasher story. This is just epic. Story 5. I ruined a wedding one time, but it wasn't my fault. I swear it wasn't. I was a friend of the groom, and I had an F-150, so I got asked to bring some chairs and a table to the reception hall, as people who own trucks are often asked to do. I agreed and was told I would be met there by a couple of women and a few guys to unload everything and place it. Cool. One of the women was pretty hot. I flirted a bit, and she flirted back. She asked if I wanted to walk along the river where the reception hall was. Sure. We walked for a while and talked, and it got hotter and hotter. We ended up making out on the riverbank for a bit and walking back to the hall, where I invited her to go for a ride in my truck. This was in rural Indiana, so in about 10 minutes, we were along some numbered county road in the back of the truck, laying on a blanket and going at it. It was late evening and there was no one around. Then a car comes toward us. We laid still and waited for them to pass, but the car stopped and the girl from earlier got out and started screaming at us. Yep, the girl I was with was the bride. The wedding got canceled, my friend punched me in the face. He found out later that I had no idea who she was and apologized. We were good now. And it was quite the scandal for a while. Eventually, the groom felt that I had actually done him a favor. Once the important people in this, to me anyway, figured out that I didn't know the bride and thought a hot chick wanted me, they were all in agreement that I did nothing wrong and she was being a flirt. I've spoken to the groom a few times at social gatherings, and he is still friends with my friend. No ill feelings, thank goodness. Story 6. I used to volunteer at a hospital that had an attached venue that they would rent out as a side business. I was usually in transport in the psych wing, but since they knew I was strong, I'd sometimes be requested to go and help down there carrying food, tables, and the like. This one wedding reception was good, except there were these 2 guests who were sisters of the bride. They were loud, obese, racist, rude, and were trying to talk politics with other people who totally didn't care. A few of the things they were calling the sous chef, second highest chef under the head chef, who was black, were either boy, monkey cook, or it, the whole time he was helping set up. They were into a conversation while the groom was talking and making a speech. They were loud enough to be heard, but clearly unaware. that if Romney doesn't win, then the whole country will go to the wetbacks. During the first dance, the song was Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You. It was really nice, and everyone was quiet, even them. A few seconds after the song ended, one said, I really like that song. Too bad she was black, which was loud enough to get a response from several guests who told them to basically go screw themselves. During the meal, the lines were set up on 3 long tables that entered into an L shape. The first 2 were identical, while the third had some specialty drinks and led back to the main hall. As instructed by the couple, everyone got a small tray and walked down either side. We were told to do 2 slices of meat, 2 scoops of sides, and so on. You could get as many different options as you wanted, but there were limits on how many of each were in place. For example, you could get 2 slices of ham, 2 slices of beef, and 2 slices of fish, but you couldn't get 3 slices of beef until everyone had theirs. The ham plates arrived and immediately began the arguing. None of it was enough. The portions were so small, yada yada. They got everything. At the meat area, they were arguing, and the caterer just said, I have to follow the rules set in place by the bride and the groom. I had a break, so I don't know what led to the next part, but for some reason, they accidentally knocked over the ham. I came out because I heard screaming, and one was on the floor crying, holding her hand. In accidentally sticking her hand under the tray to flip it, she learned just how hot fire makes metal. She was screaming. The bride was in the other room and just looked so embarrassed. Eventually, enough was enough, and the bride, groom, and the bride's mother told them to leave. They got around the corner out of view of guests, and one smacked the bride. The groom, at the speed of light, in what I can only say is pure reflex, as neurons don't process that fast, punched her in the face with full force, sending her tumbling backwards. Security was called by the caterer who escorted the 2 women out. 15 minutes later, cops came as the sisters called them and asked them to speak to the groom, the chef, and the security. After a few minutes, the cops let them all come back in. The next 2 hours went well, but we ran out of frozen grape juice ice cubes for the drinks table. They ran out of frozen grape juice. Man, that's the real shocker. If you like these kinds of outrageously funny threads, smash that like button. And while you're at it, subscribe to my channel and be updated when I post new videos. Story 7. Not a guest, but the photographer. She didn't really ruin the wedding, but she wasn't the greatest photographer in the world. She's a friend of a family member and runs her own photo company. She gave us a good deal, and at rehearsal, she had lots of good ideas. Towards the end of rehearsal, I pulled her aside and told her specifically one picture that I wanted. My wife had no idea that I picked it out and got her wedding ring joined with her engagement ring. She was under the impression I picked up her engagement ring from getting polished and cleaned up for our day a few days before, and I gave it to my mom. In reality, I had the ring for weeks, stashed away in my safe. It was gorgeous and she was going to be so surprised. I wanted her reaction caught on camera. Well, the photographer said she would sneak up behind the officiant and grab that moment. Where was she when I was putting the ring on my wife? In the back of the hall, as far away from us as possible. I was irritated, but a family friend caught my wife's reaction. Kind of. I brushed it off. Next up were the after-ceremony pictures. This lady had us standing on a hill. She was at the bottom, and the people around her were taking pictures as well. No biggie, but as a professional photographer, you need to make sure that people stay focused on your camera, not the third aunt of my twice-removed cousin's boyfriend's dad. That was irritating. Another thing, you know how there's supposed to be a whole bunch of candid shots of people hanging out and having a good time? Yeah, we got maybe 50 of those. Where was the photographer? Oh, she was busy talking to the family member that she's a friend of. She put her camera away. I was livid. I didn't show it. I didn't bring it to my wife's attention because I didn't want her to freak out. She was having a great time. So instead of really great pictures from a lady who runs her own company, we got mediocre pictures from her and way better pictures from the cell phones and my sister's Canon DSLR that was floating around. I'm so glad we weren't the ones paying her. I would have snapped. Story 8. Not ruined so much as expected. My brother had an interesting toast at our wedding. He is genuinely a super friendly guy that everyone likes. He proceeded to get fairly buzzed, and when his best man speech started, he proceeded to thank everyone for attending. Next, he had to thank the grandparents for attending and doing what they did, gesturing with air quotes, so that our parents could be here. Next was a thanks to the parents for doing what they did so we kids could all be here. He then mumbles, "God bless the mashed potatoes," and drops the mic, stumbling off the dance floor. We had a good meal of prime rib and some of the best chipotle pepper mashed potatoes ever. The whole reception erupted in laughter, and Mom went to the chef to get the recipe. Dubbed as wedding potatoes. Gold potatoes, enough for 4 to 6 people. Heavy cream, 1/4 to 1/2 depending on desired consistency. Smoked Gouda cheese, 8 ounces, shredded and mixed in. Chipotle peppers in adobo sauce, 1.5 of the 6 ounces can, finely chopped. I loved mashed taters. Might try making this recipe. Story 9. Not my wedding, but my boyfriend's, at the time, aunt's second wedding. His cousin Beth, the bride's daughter, got hammered and accused a young girl of coming onto her man, although her boyfriend wasn't even there. She glares at the kid the whole ceremony, rolling her eyes during the vows. At the reception, Beth cornered her in the bathroom, slurring her words and screaming and threatening she was going to knock her out. The poor girl was just crying, asking her what she did wrong. When her mom finally asked her to leave, Beth got mad that no one was taking her side. I don't know about you, but it's hard to feel bad for an overweight alcohol-dependent screaming at a frightened 120-pound girl. It really brought the reception down since there were only about 30 people who stayed after that fight. Story 10. I'm not sure if she ruined it, but it is a fun story. In my wedding, my best friend was our best man. His wife, now divorced, was a very hot, lush, drunken mess. It had been this way for years. She promised him that she wouldn't drink during the wedding or reception. So about halfway through the reception, she is out there on the dance floor on my 50-year-old, 300-pound uncle, just wasted and making out with him. It seems she had a flask hidden somewhere. She then starts trying to make out with just about every guy she could find. My friend then collected his wife and had to leave. Now, on the way home, she gets pissed, jumps from the car in motion, and dashes down the street. She's a marathon runner, and my buddy lost her while turning around the car. She proceeds to go to a local bar and meet up with some women she knows from her work. They drink more, and she gets into an argument with a woman she knows at the bar. That woman leaves after my friend's wife attempts to get her to fight her. So my friend's wife, in her work friend's car, chased them home. She ends up trying to kick in the woman's home door, all hammered and crazy. This woman finally opens the door and roughs up my friend's wife. Her work friends had to take her to the hospital, where my buddy finally got the call to pick up his wife. Story 11. I wasn't there, but friends of mine tell the story of how the best man's speech involved telling everyone that he and the groom had been lovers since college, and that if there was any real justice in the world, the two of them would be getting married. He was serious. He smashed a champagne flute and burst into tears. He did this at the reception in front of everyone. This happened about a decade ago, long before the whole "it's a prank bro" thing became a thing. It sounded pretty epic. Story 12. I was not a guest, but there was a popular place for wedding photos. I was a groomsman, so there's like 3 or 4 bridal parties waiting to take pictures. This one group was hilariously messed up. All the groomsmen are completely and devastatingly hammered. The new couple was having a knockdown, drag-out screaming match, and the bride threw her bouquet into the lake. The MIL is throwing a temper tantrum and then sees all of us watching this delightful caper and screams at us, "What are you looking at?" To which one of our party members says, loud enough for them to hear, "Well, that was worth the price of admission right there." Story 13. How about the wedding being ruined by itself? I was dating a girl whose cousin was getting married. Her cousin was an obese goth girl getting married to a dude even bigger than her. We show up on the day of the wedding. I 100% promise this is serious. They've secretly decided it will be a juggalo wedding. Both bride and groom are in juggalo makeup, and the priest's speech included, "Thank God for the insane clown posse," and "Thank God for Craigslist," where they met, I guess. It was weird. If that couple was happy, good for them. I guess that's all that matters. Story 14. I didn't know it at the time, but when I was little, there was a guy making a scene at a wedding we were at. 2 of the groomsmen calmly stood up and followed him to the kitchen area. You could go back there and put in a specialty drink order. About 10 minutes later, they both came back in and one was holding a frozen bag of peas in his hand. I just thought they all went to get drinks and he burned his hand or something, but the guy never came back. I found out a few years later that they grabbed him in the kitchen and told him to leave. The guy told them off and shoved one of the groomsmen, who grabbed the buzz guy's collar and repetitively hit him in the face, thus pushing him out of the door with only his fist over and over, hence the P's. It turned out that the buzzed guy was a friend of a cousin of a family friend, the person actually invited, who just decided to invite himself when he saw the invitation on the family friend's fridge during a cookout or something. Story 15. This was not my wedding, but I was the flower girl. I know it was a while ago, but remember it like it was yesterday. So the bride and company show up at the wedding. The bride had her gown, the flower girl, me, had her little dress, and the seamstress was delivering the bridesmaids' dresses to the wedding venue. Of course, the wedding party got there far in advance. Long story short, the seamstress never showed up with the bridesmaid dresses. Nobody knew what to do. Total panic. While 7-year-old me sat in the corner, I wasn't quite sure what the ruckus was about, so I tugged on the bride and said, "They could wear those dresses," pointing to the choir robes in the corner closet. Her eyes got wide, and they did. Wedding saved. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy Have You Been Part of a Bridezilla Wedding? Story 5 will make you cringe at the idea of bridezillas. See you on that video.